Chapter 15. The officious, bulbous officer stared laser bolts at Kirtan Loor. I can see your orders are all properly drawn, but I've never appreciated intelligence operatives meddling in fleet affairs. I appreciate your concern, Admiral Devlia, as well as your willingness to return from retirement to Imperial service. But Imperial security must take precedence at this time, which I believe you would agree is most critical. The little man brushed his gray mustache with a finger, and his expression eased. Just so we understand each other. Of course. Curtin cared little for the Admiral's concerns, but the interdictor cruiser Black Asp was part of Devlia's command. Its report of being ambushed by a squadron identified as Rogue Squadron had brought Curtin all the way from Coruscant to Vladet in the Ratchik system to speak with the Black Asp's Captain Ilior. He suspected a great chunk of Devlia's discomfort with his visit came because it forced the Admiral to deal with Ilior, one of the women who had risen to command to fill the gaps left in the Imperial Navy after the Endor debacle. The intelligence agents found himself anxious to meet Captain Ilior. He had read her file, as well as that of Admiral Devlia and most of the senior command staff during his journey out from Coruscant. The files were a welcome departure from tracking the various rumors about Rogue Squadron, but her record especially intrigued him. In studying it, he caught hints of how forceful she had to have been to have risen in the Imperial Navy as far as she got before the Emperor's death. Devlia stood and smoothed his gray jacket over his round belly. And I'll tell you here and now that I'll stop any questions I think are off the mark. I understand that, sir. Dream all you want, Admiral. Devlia led Curtin from his spacious office down a narrow hallway in the mansion that housed the command staff. The Admiral preceded him into a small study that had been converted into a conference room through the addition of a big table that dominated the room. Boxes full of data cards still lined the built-in shelves, and Curtin judged it a larger library than he would have expected to find on a planet like Vladet. Devlia secured himself the chair at the head of the table, then waved a hand towards the woman standing at the far end. Captain Ilior, this is Agent Kirtan Loor. He wants to ask you some questions about the ambush. Yes, sir. The brown-haired woman looked at Curtin without a trace of the hunted look most people acquired when told intelligence wanted to question them. I'll help if I am able, Agent Loor. Her voice had an edge to it that backed up the challenge in her dark eyes. Curtin assumed her lack of fear came after years of being one of the Navy's NHM track, non-human. The Empire's bias against aliens and women reached an unprecedented level of refinement in the Imperial Navy. Ilior had been sent to serve under Colonel Thrawn and a host of other alien superior officers before she had been given a ship of her own. She would have been stuck on that Kara-class cruiser had not the defeat at Endor made the need for competent officers so great that the command staff's survivors reevaluated personnel and awarded commands according to some semblance of merit. I'm sure you will, Captain. I would like any reports you have filed about this action, as well as any holographic records of it, along with any communications intercepts. He walked around to the left side of the table, then turned back towards Devlia. With the Admiral's permission, of course. The old man nodded. Very well. If you don't mind, please tell me what happened. May I sit? By all means. Curtin smiled but remained standing. Make yourself comfortable. Captain Ilior sat and turned her chair so she gave Devlia her profile. We had information that a smuggler running supplies to the rebels was expected in the Korak system at a particular time, and would be departing after picking up some supplies there. I sent a shuttle in to monitor the smuggler's situation while I put the Black Asp on the fringe of the system. When the pulsar skates started to head out of the system, I jumped the Black Asp in and brought my G7X gravjectors up. Curtin frowned. Intrasystem jumping is a rather unusual tactic, isn't it? Ilior shook her head. I've seen it used with great success out in the unknown sector. It worked at Korax, too, because the skate had no idea where we came from. It took them nearly 6 seconds to begin evasive maneuvers. I took the liberty of closing to use our ion cannons on the skate during that time. Then a dozen X-Wings came into the system. I deployed my interceptor squadron, but none of the pilots are Academy material. They would have been eaten up, so I brought the Black Asp in and managed to disable one X-Wing. By then, however, the remainder of them screened the skate and hit my forward shield with a volley of proton torpedoes. The shield came down, and I lost 2 laser batteries. I had to choose between reinforcing my shields or keeping the gravjectors operational. I made the former choice, recovered 5 interceptors, and went to lightspeed. Devlia leaned forward. They were waiting for the Black Asp. They came out of hyperspace right on top of her. Kirtan stroked his chin. I don't see that one thing establishes the other. I see no evidence of an ambush. Ilior's head came up. That's what I've been telling the Admiral. You're both blind. I think, sir, with all due respect, you are making unwarranted assumptions. Kirtan began to pace around the edge of the table, passing behind the Admiral and back again. Interdictor cruisers are designed to pull ships out of hyperspace. Of course, only where the route is known in advance can they be positioned in such a way that doing this is possible. In this case, since the Black Asp was in the Corax system specifically to prevent a ship from entering hyperspace, you have chosen to discard one of its primary functions. Preposterous! Which is precisely the kind of mistake I would have made previously. Curtin allowed himself a slight smile. Check your thinking. If you chose to ambush an interdictor cruiser, would you do so with a single squadron of X-Wings? Devlia's face reddened. Perhaps I would not, but I have training most rebel officers do not. Granted, sir. Yet the rebels are not without wise leadership. Curtin left allusions to Yavin and Endor unvoiced, but he saw by Devlia's expression the man had caught them anyway. I might ask why the rebels would waste their time attacking an interdictor cruiser at all. No disrespect intended to you, Captain Elior, or your ship, but the action of interdictors was hardly crippling to the rebellion. Our main battle fleets are garrisoning key worlds, like Corellia and Quat, so even predation on interdictors is unlikely to draw them out. Ilior did not smile, but her nod was not as stiff as before. My assumption was that we had suffered the misfortune of pulling a convoy out of hyperspace, but the Admiral found such coincidence unlikely. Curtin smiled. The Admiral, despite the misjudgment, is formidable enough that I should think the rebels utter fools to operate in his command sector. Devlia had opened his mouth to protest the first half of Curtin's statement. The second half, which Curtin had added as a sop to the man's vanity, killed the Admiral's comment and clicked his jaw shut. The intelligence agent again focused on Captain Ilior. How did you identify them as Rogue Squadron? Communication intercepts used rogue call signs. Visual data is not very good, but there is a unique unit crest painted on the S-foils. Preliminary searches correlate it with a crest said to be that of Rogue Squadron. Also, the Pulsar skate is a ship with Corellian connections, just like Wedge Antilles. And the pilots were hot. They took off 7 of my interceptors, with the last 2 falling to an X-Wing that was dead. Devlia leaned back. Interesting, but circumstantial, as I'm sure Agent Loor will agree. Circumstantial, yes, but persuasive. Everything she had said about the squadron that attacked the Black Asp did seem to point to Rogue Squadron. Curtin doubted any other unit in the rebellion would sport rogue call signs, and the crest data would have to be checked. Still and all, it was not conclusive. It is, however, a start. Captain, did your shuttle stay in system and monitor the squadron for outbound vector and speed? Ilior scowled. No, and Lieutenant Poten has been reprimanded for fleeing when not threatened. I do have entry to vector and velocity data, and it is triangulated with the data from the shuttle. That's something, then. I will make certain you have it in time for your return to Imperial Center, Agent Loor. Devlia stood. Assuming you want nothing else here. I do want to speak to the pilots who flew against the X-Wings, as well as review any data recorded from the interceptors that were destroyed. I'll see the interviews are arranged right away. Take your time, Admiral. The next 2 or 3 days will be soon enough. The old man's expression soured. Staying that long, are you? Longer, I suspect. Curtin smiled broadly for the Admiral. If Rogue Squadron is operating in this area, and I believe it is, I'll leave only after we've found them and destroyed them, and not a moment sooner. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.